Morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Bore da bawb, croeso mawr I chi. Welcome to this morning's breakfast briefing. My name is John Parry-Jones. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all here this morning. A slight change of plan this morning. Those of you who can see the front will see that there are two empty chairs here. Two of our guest speakers are en route. Their train this morning was cancelled, so we've had a bit of a shuffle. You may find some of the slides are slightly out of sync this morning because we've just moved things around. This morning, we've got two separate presentations, which actually works in our favour, given the circumstances. Two separate organisations coming together to talk about a common theme, looking at leading public services in a digital age. Both parties hopefully looking to share their visions, their thoughts, their plans for the future, and also to share some of their success stories. Shortly, the two guests who are missing this morning, Harriet and Myra, will be arriving soon. They're due in the next 5 minutes. And I'll introduce them as soon as they arrive, once we get around to their presentation. An interesting story with Harriet and Myra. They're obviously going to share their insights into their strategic approach. They both work for the Centre for Digital Public Services, but it's a bit more than that. They're both co-CEO of the organisation. And I think as much as anything, they're going to touch on that, the advantages and the challenges of being co-CEOs of a large organisation. So that's something that they're also going to touch on this morning. But in terms, jumping ahead of myself a bit here. In terms of swapping things around, I'm also delighted to welcome Angharad Watson from the Digital Transformation Innovation Institute. It's a tongue-twisting breakfast briefing for me this morning. You can see with all of the words there. Angharad manages the Digital Transformation Innovation Institute, which aims to look to give opportunities for businesses to work with the university. And as well as talking about the opportunities that there are for businesses, Angharad's also going to share a case study of the work that was carried out with National Highways recently, to give you a feel for how those opportunities can come to fruition. But before I hand over, I would like to just draw your attention to some of the events which we've got coming up over the next couple of months. It looks fairly thin on the ground. We close our breakfast briefings for August, so we don't have anything in August, which means that it's slightly less detailed than usual. July, some of you, if you join us regularly for our breakfast briefings, will know that we've been trying for the last 3 or 4 years to change the format of our July briefing to make it an interview or a conversation with a special guest, the leader of a business. We had Julianne Haynes here from the Principality, and James Timpson joined us a few years ago as well. So we've got plans in place for our July briefing. There will be a briefing, and we're hoping it's going to be somebody fairly senior, but you may just need to bear with me a week while we're finalising those details. October's breakfast briefing, so the first one for the autumn, Laura and Dr. Rowan Williams are going to join us to discuss the Constitutional Future of Wales report that was published earlier this year. It's had 6 months for people to digest what was discussed, what was proposed. And Laura and Rowan are going to join us to discuss some of the actions that may be taken from that and some of the further feedback that has been generated from the report. And then just a note for a course which we've got lined up in October as well with Dr. Hussein Yahan Shalou. Some of you again may recall that 2 years ago, Hussein was with us and ran a breakfast briefing on blockchain. And this is the next step from that, explaining a bit more about blockchain in a bit more detail than he was able to do on that morning. We had an hour session with him that day. This one will be a full day session, going into the detail, the fundamentals of blockchain, giving you an idea of how to understand how it all works. If you've ever thought about blockchain and wanted to know more about it and how it may help your business, Hussein is the person to speak to. He's an authority in this area and is will be a really good session for you to attend to understand more about it. So we can send out details over the course of the next couple of months. But if you are interested, then do get in touch with us. Also, our part-time MBA restarts in September of this year. It's a part-time program, which means that you can combine your studies with full-time employment. If you do, or if you have somebody within your organization who you think may be interested in that program, again, do get in touch with me or with Salome, whose details are on the screen just at the moment, but do inquire, do get in touch with me if you know of anybody who may be interested in that program. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Angharad to take us through the next steps. Just a reminder that this morning's session is going to be recorded. If you do have questions this morning, if you're here in the suite with us, if you just raise your hand when we get round to the end, it's two separate presentations. So I'm going to leave all the questions until the end of the session so that we don't have to interrupt and that we can try and keep to time. Looks as though Harriet and Myra are here, which is great news. So we're going to start with Angharad. If you've got questions, if you're here in the suite, put your hand up when we get around to the Q&A, then I'll bring a microphone around to you. If you're online, if you can liaise with Angharad and put questions in the chat box, then we'll liaise with you in relation to either unmuting, asking you to unmute yourselves, or for Angharad to ask the question. So we've got two Angharads in the room today, which is confusing for all of us. Myra, Harriet, would you like to take a seat? Sorry, we've swapped everything around this morning. And I'm going to skip through your slides first so that I can get to Angharad's slides. So a little bit clunky this morning. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Sorry, we're a bit late.
No problem. So, Angharad, it's all over to you, and I'll pass over to you, Harriet and Myra, so we do the swap over halfway through. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, just put my water somewhere that I'm not going to destroy all the electrics. Thank you for coming this morning. As John said, I'm going to be talking mainly about the Digital Transformation Innovation Institute and some of the projects that we are involved with. So it is a mouthful. It sort of makes a little bit more sense if you consider that we are part of a suite of innovation and research institutes in the university. So there are 4 innovation institutes, of which one is digital transformation. There's also Net Zero, Neuroscience and Mental Health, and Security, Crime and Intelligence. And then there is one research institute, which is Systems Immunity. And the purpose of us being innovation institutes, as opposed to research institutes, is that we are focused on that innovation and impact. How do we get the research that's happening inside the university out into the real world where it can make a difference in people's lives? And the normal expectation, certainly my background is in life sciences, the normal expectation from discovery research to impact is about 17 years. So how can we make that a bit shorter? How can we really get those people together earlier in that process, get those innovations out there for impact? And that's what we're trying to do. So we hope that the institutes form a front door to the university. So if you are interested in anything to do with digital transformation, you contact the Digital Transformation Innovation Institute, and that comes through to me and my fantastic ops officer, Julie, and we can put you in touch with the right academics. We have 3 academic directors, Pete Burnap, Yulia Tudansva, and Tim Edwards. Some of you may know Tim as he's part of the business school here. Pete and Yulia are both cybersecurity experts. And the case study that I'm going to talk about today is actually a project where Tim and Yulia work together with external partners to deliver a transformation project. So I think you guys can see it in the room. Up there, it looks quite small, but this just gives a sense of the breadth of expertise that we have at our disposal at DTII, which I'm going to call it DTII because it's a lot easier than saying the whole name. The parts in blue are what we refer to as our priority thematic areas. And in layman's terms, that's the application. Where are we applying digital transformation? And as you can see, we're applying it in healthcare, in supply chain and logistics, transport, fintech and the economy, circular economy, and predicting uncertain futures. We've seen, I think 5 years ago, if I'd been giving this talk, I would not have been able to accurately predict a single thing that was about to happen. So luckily, we have experts who know how to do that, how to calculate for the uncertainty of what's coming and how we handle that. Now, those application areas, the thematic priority themes, are underpinned by technical expertise at the university. And this technical expertise is in all the areas you might expect, so cybersecurity, AI, large language models, Internet of Things, but it's also in operational research, organizational research, human factors, the psychology around using digital transformation, human-centric computing. How do we actually interact with the computers, with the digital technology? It's still about people. And those can really kind of be classified into how we understand the technology, so all the really the hard nuts and bolts parts of what we're doing for digital, but also how do we understand the people that are using it and the organizations that are bringing it in? And that is the full end-to-end digital transformation process. What are you trying to implement? What's the organization you're trying to bring it into? And how are the people going to handle that? And that's the array of expertise that we have at the Institute. And that, of course, cuts across all schools and colleges in the university, because some of those experts are in the School of Psychology, some of them are in Geography and Planning, some of them are in the business school, but we are able to bring those people together. And actually, Hussein, who's mentioned today, he's a really active member of our institute as well. We meet regularly, we share ideas, and we share our research. So we launched about a year ago. And the first thing that we did when we launched was we held a number of town halls in our thematic areas. And the reason for doing this is we want to be challenge-led. We are coming up with lots of solutions within the university, but we want to make sure they're the right solutions. So we engage with our stakeholders to find out what actually are the big challenges that you're facing and how does our research line up with that. So we took visual minutes when we did it, which produces these fantastic graphics. I hope you can sort of see them. We've got them up in person in the Spark building. And the kind of key challenges that came out there from healthcare were precision and personalized medicine. We are accruing so much data about ourselves, our genetics, scans of our bones, scans of our brains, scans of our internal organs. What do we do with all that information? If you've had a scan 10 years ago, can someone still access that? And can it be used when you go for another complaint later? All of that data and using it to tailor medicine to you is really how we want to use it. But then that's surrounded by really important questions around the standards of that data. Is it all clean? Is it true? Is it usable? Is it integrated? If you had a scan when you lived in Pembrokeshire and now you live in Cardiff, can someone access the system that that's held on? Can the data move across? Can it be linked? The SAIL data bank run by Swansea University links together things like socioeconomic information with your health information, because we know that those two things are inextricably linked. And then there is governance and ownership, sharing data where appropriate, but protecting it as well, and being sure about who you're sharing it with and why, and who owns it, and empowering people to own their own data. We did the same in economy. This brought up some really interesting challenges. Blockchain as a facilitator. There's going to be a fantastic talk about blockchain. We mostly know about it in relation to cryptocurrencies, but it has a huge amount of uses. The idea of a distributed ledger that everybody can access, that is open to all, to track how things happen, has lots of potential application areas. So how can we use that? And then there's a very real question of who's being excluded from digital transformation. There are a certain proportion of the population who do not have a bank account. If you do not have a bank account, you cannot tap onto public transport. You cannot buy a coffee at a cash-free coffee shop. In some places, you can't park your car because you can't pay the ticket machine in the car park. So how do we look at those people? How do we allow them to have bank accounts so that they can access all of these parts of society? And then again, you're coming down to fraud, trust, what is the truth? How do we verify everybody is who they say they are and are acting correctly? Similar approaches with transport. And again, it brought up both new and cross-cutting challenges. So the big one is decarbonisation. We have all of this technology. How can we use all the data and technology to move away from our reliance on fossil fuels for our transport? And in transport, we have brought in logistics and supply chain, because those are moving on the same road and rail and freight and shipping. Cyber resilience came up here, but it applies across everywhere. We recently had the case where all of our airspace got shut down because of one incorrect piece of data, and that wasn't even put in by a bad actor, that was an accident. So what happens if someone deliberately tries to disrupt? So the question in cybersecurity and cyber resilience is not, might I be attacked, is when you are attacked, how damaging will that attack be? Is that going to bring your services down for 10 minutes or 10 days? And what are the impacts on your company? We looked at connected vehicles and the highways ecosystem. As data becomes more important for highways, what happens if that's What does that look like? How is the security? And how does that ecosystem work? If you're getting a lot of information for British highways, what happens if you bring a car in from France and they arrive into our highway system? What happens when you leave a motorway and go into a city centre and you're not being managed by the same people and the same data providers? So all of those kind of questions. And then the really big question, which I think is an important one for Wales, is rural versus urban environments. Huge amount of our population are in rural communities. So where do they fit in this new digital world? And how can we really support those communities in ways that they've maybe been excluded before, but digital allows them to be part of it? I've touched on a lot of those. These were the cross-cutting challenges that came out of all of those areas that underpin everything. I won't spend too much time on that, and I'll move straight to our case study of where we worked with National Highways, who are in a process of change at the moment. Up until recently, National Highways' main job was build roads. They were a capital projects organisation. They built and maintained physical roads. As we move to connected vehicles, to autonomous vehicles, they are now handling data. They're becoming a data organisation, and they're becoming a customer-facing data organisation, because you're now going to rely on them to tell you in real time, should I go on the M5 this morning, or should I go on a back road? So they came to us to ask, how do we do this? How do we handle our customer data in an ethical way? Because we want to be at the front of this. We don't want to be following other people in this area. We've come to you as a university to help us lead in how we manage our customer data. So our team that we brought on board, Yulia, who's cybersecurity, and then Tim, who comes from a more ethical social science point of view. And then these were the researchers who worked on it. Maureen is another business school graduate. So what they looked at was how they store the data, customer data. We hope they're not patients on the highways. Customer data and the ethical and responsible use, and how we manage privacy and security around that. So the process that they approached, how they dealt with this question, the challenge that they'd been given by National Highways, they looked at what they wanted to get out in the end, then did a literature review, as you would expect, because we wanted to be leading this, not following. And then they went to the people involved, to the stakeholders. They had workshops with the customers and workshops with the National Highways expert, and they synthesized all of that information to then produce a framework for ethical data, for managing customer data in an ethical way, and suggestions for how National Highways can implement it. So that was the process. I don't expect you to read all of this, but this just gives a flavour of the work that came out of those workshops. So you can see here that they've classified the feedback that they've had from people and mapped how those areas overlap. So how data security overlaps with privacy and the consequences of loss of that security. And you can see people's fears. Is it going to put pressure on side roads if you move people off motorways? Can I opt out of my data being collected? That ownership of data and empowerment. How secure is the data? Can someone take it? Could bad actors affect how our roads work? Because you can see how that could go bad very quickly if someone can infiltrate that system. So they synthesized all of that data. And on a project of this scale, they really had to consider what is at stake. What is at stake here is the reputation of National Highways. They're building a reputation as a customer service provider, not as a capital projects builder now. And they want to be socially responsible. They want to be seen positively in how they handle customer data. Additionally, there is an economic aspect to this. And if you are seen as a leader and responsible, and your customers are happy to work with you, then there are economic benefits to that innovation and to being a leader in the field. And also sustainable development, social and business, thinking about that triple bottom line. They are a public body, so it isn't just all about shareholders and the kind of traditional bottom line, but how are we being sustainable and how are we serving our customers? What came out ultimately then was sort of 3 nodes. Again, I don't expect you to see all the bits, but what they are 3 responsibilities that they came out with for National Highways. Responsibility to do no harm. Whatever they're doing should not make things worse for customers. So that brings up questions of transparency, of inclusivity. We shouldn't be excluding people by anything we're doing. Equally, they're a public body. There is a responsibility to do good. So actively benefit customers, actively improve the experience of road users. And then that is all underpinned by responsible governance. Again, who is seeing the data? Where is it being shared to? How are we managing all of that? And this actually then came up with the framework. So this is effectively the information that's on the previous slide, but you'll probably be able to read this one a little bit better. And this is the one that will go on file and is sent to National Highways for them to refer to as they implement their policies going forward. And it just summarises those things: security, privacy, accessibility, proactive approach to ethics, engaging with the customers, and continuous evaluation and improvement. So all of those things that to a researcher are possibly bread and butter in how you would conduct this, we are passing that expertise out to this organisation to say, this is how, if you want to stay at the cutting edge of this, if you want to be managing your customer data successfully and be seen as a good service provider, this is how you need to do it. And further, with the responsibility to do good, there are streams there about education, communication, data policies, and responsibility to do no harm. So we gave this as an output to National Highways for them to use going forward, and guidance on how to do responsible governance. And governance is something that I think everybody sort of shakes their head about, but when we're talking about data, that really is the most important thing, because if there is a data breach, that destroys your reputation straight away. And people, what you need if you're handling people's data is their trust. And there can only be trust if there is proper governance, hand in hand with proper cybersecurity. And those are things that we really impressed upon National Highways. So the framework is out there and available. Julia, it was co-produced with the customers and with National Highways. They're keen to actually have feedback. So if there are any things that any of you would like to feed into that, or if you go away and have a look at it, Julia is keen to hear from everybody. So in the last couple of minutes, I'm just going to talk about one other way. So that project was really, I suppose, the traditional route of how you would interact with the Digital Transformation Innovation Institute. You would contact us and say, we've got a challenge. Who are the researchers who can help us with that challenge? And then in that scenario, National Highways were able to fund the work. In other scenarios, we might then go to someone like Innovate UK to fund that project. We'd work up a project together and find some money to pay for it. One of the projects that the Institute manages jointly with the Security, Crime and Intelligence Institute is the Hartree Centre Cardiff Hub. Now, this is £1.5 million of investment from the Science and Technologies Facilities Council. And the purpose of this project, it's running over, we're about halfway through, we've got about a year and a half to go. And the purpose is to empower SMEs in the Cardiff capital region and actually out into the Western Gateway. So going down a little bit into Somerset and Gloucestershire and down west into West Wales, which I think is recently, it used to be Swansea, but it's recently been extended all the way into Pembrokeshire. And what we're doing there is we have the funding, we can offer the support to SMEs at no additional cost to the SMEs. It is actually subsidy. So there's a few little forms that you need to fill out. And we are able then to, in a very low risk way, help SMEs try AI approaches. And that's the main area of our expertise here, is we have expertise in human-centered AI, and that includes responsible and transparent AI. So whatever we do, we're not just going to say, we'll just go to ChatGPT and then we won't. We're also talking about the kind of governance and security. We tend to build chatbots and large language models that can sit locally within SMEs. So they're not sending their customer data out into large global multinationals where you don't know what's happened to it, keeping it all in-house, but still having the usability of an effective large language model. We also do knowledge-driven learning. So that's assisting with decision-making in your business, using your data to the best effect. The way that you interact with us there is you contact the Hartree Hub. You come through to our business liaison, Louisa, who's absolutely fantastic, and she'll chat through the options. And if it looks like it's appropriate for your business, and at the moment what we're doing is helping businesses that are quite technologically advanced, and we're helping them take that next step to see all right, if we really want to engage in this AI space, what resource do we need? Do we need a data scientist? Do we need a research software engineer? What is the actual skills that we need? And so we work with them for either what we call an assist, which is 12 hours of developer time, to really explore a problem and come up with an outline solution or an approach that they could use. Or we can have up to a 3-month really in-depth project where we build something that they can take forward for their businesses. At the end of that, one of the pieces of information we'll give them is, if you wanted to do this long term, what expertise would you need? So they don't have to expensively recruit the wrong expertise and find out the hard way that they've picked the wrong skill set. We will be able to advise them how to embed this in their business going forward. So we're in the first tranche of this project, and we're very much hoping to be extended. We're looking to interact with 55 SMEs for those short assists and to go to long projects for 22. And we've had a lot of interaction. It's really positive. And there are actually, as you go out, there are flyers both for Hartree and for the Digital Transformation Innovation Institute. So if you want to get in touch with us, if all of this has set off little pings in your brain going, actually, yeah, I would really like some advice on that, or I've got this project that I think you could help with, please do get in touch. We are an open door. Come and work with us. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Lovely. Thank you, Angharad. As I said earlier, if you've got questions for Angharad, if you can just store them in your minds, or you could pop them in the chat box if you're at home at the moment, and we'll do Q&As at the end of the session. So now, delighted to welcome Myra and Harriet, who are going to run the next part of this morning's presentation. Harriet, you starting, or are you both doing this together? Both do it together. What I'm going to do, so there are fewer slides with this part of the presentation this morning. So for the audience at home, we're going to stop sharing the slides. There is a QR code on one of the slides that we'll make sure that we do share with you afterwards. Are you happy with that? That it means that the audience at home can see you as opposed to just the slides. I just need to make sure that your microphones are both on as well if you've got green light on.
Both say thank you, Angharad. That was really interesting. Really good to hear. Certainly lots of pings going off in my mind.
Can I just see the...
It's absolutely great.
Yes, please.
Myself.
Yeah. So the audience at home don't pick up. Yeah, it's just, I'll do it for you.
Thank you. Better? Yeah, you can hear me now.
Oh, brilliant.
Your green light is on. Brilliant. You're good to go. Are you going to sit? You're going to sit down for yours? You're welcome to stand.
Let's sit. No, that's fine.
So we're double heading.
Brilliant. I'm going to leave you to it, and we'll do questions and answers at the end of the session. Lovely. Thank you.
So we've been job sharing for 14 years. So this is going to work telepathically.
We always have to say you get less for murder or something like that. But,
That is a bit like a marriage, if you know what I mean, or a long-term partnership. It is a long-term partnership. And I'm Myra, and this is Harriet. And as I say, we've job shared for 14 years. We're going to talk a little bit about job sharing, just a little bit and where we've come from. And then we're going to move into digital transformation and hopefully complement a bit your presentation, which was, I mean, so impressive. And I love the graphics at the beginning. The drawings are so powerful, aren't they? And that case study is fascinating. Harriet and I, as I say, have been working together for 14 years. We started job sharing at the not at the BBC, we met at the BBC where we worked opposite each other but not together. We started job sharing at the British Council where we worked on global digital transformation, and we both had a background in global international broadcasting in what was then called future media or new media. And from the British Council, we moved into DEFRA, and we were Chief Digital Officer at DEFRA, working in Whitehall through Brexit and COVID. And then after that, came to Wales, where we both live. We both live near Abergavenny, not together, I hasten to add. That's kind of a coincidence. And lead the Centre for Digital Public Services. And that was set up in response to the digital strategy for Wales that came into existence in 2018. The Centre for Digital Public Services was set up in 2020. We joined in 22, and that's really about supporting public services on their journey of digital transformation. So shall I do public services and digital transformation first, and then we'll talk about leadership, or shall we do being CEOs and job sharing first?
Well, let's talk about being CEOs and job sharing for a bit, because I think we got the message that you were quite interested in how the job share works. And, you know, that there certainly have been many rooms that we've gone into keen to talk about technology, and, you know, we'll say some stuff about technology and they'll say, what's it like job sharing? So we will say perhaps a little bit more about how useful it is to job share in a senior position. I mean, for us, it was an answer to a kind of, you know, life stage, both having young children, both having made the decision to move out of London, wanting to occupy senior roles, but not wanting to spend our weeks in London. So we looked for something that would meet that bill. And as Myra says, that led us to the career through the British Council, then as Chief Digital Officer at DEFRA, and now here at the Centre for Digital Public Services. But I think if many of you are working in the digital world, and in fact, probably, you know, whichever world you work in, one of the things that we found is it's very difficult when you're trying to persuade people to change. People don't want to change. People don't want to transform. By and large, you know, you meet, you know, lots of people actually who are keen, but it's incredibly difficult. And I think there being two of us in the kind of roles that we've occupied, it's been a real benefit and a real strength to have two of us and to be able to share, you know, and re-energize each other and mentor each other and make the case jointly. And, you know, as we all know, you tend to get on better with some stakeholders than others. So it's really helpful to have two of us who can, you know, have close relationships with different stakeholders and be able to, I think one of the great things is that whatever comes out from us has been peer reviewed already between us. So we've said, is this a good idea? Let's build on this between us. And then hopefully when it comes out, when the decision is shared, it's a better quality decision. And we've also had to communicate it to each other. So hopefully it's quite well communicated. We do quite a lot of, I think over the years, we have developed a very good kind of almost not extra sensory perception or whatever, but we're very good at reading each other's minds. When we got to DEFRA, actually somebody said, oh, there was a rumor that you were twins. And I said, absolutely not. No. But we do have this kind of, you know, we do have quite a good sense of what each other's thinking. We know each other very well. We can, you know, support and challenge each other. So for us, it's a really good model. And although I think that, you know, both of us now in terms of life stage, we could work, we could do full-time jobs. There's something really energizing, powerful and strong about job sharing. So it really works for us. And I think it's one of those things where people quite often who want to job share say to me, I just can't believe that my employer will accept that. And we have found that each job we've applied for, the fact that we're a job share is an attraction. And I don't know whether that's the way we present it or that, you know, we've shown already that it works. But certainly when we joined CDPS and when we joined DEFRA too, the permanent secretary at DEFRA was kind of really excited that they'd appointed a senior job share. And she was kind of tweeting about it and, you know, thrilled. And when we joined CDPS, it was definitely a kind of a plus. You know, people always say, how are you going to manage it and all of that. But I do think, you know, I think it's become people, it's almost like a badge of, you know, well, we've got a job share at a really senior level. Our minister when we joined was Lee Waters, and he was, you know, also tweeting about, you know, this is really exciting. Anyway, so we find there are many real strengths in job sharing, quite a lot for us to manage between us. But I think, and certainly in a difficult field like digital change, modernisation, really interesting about the wording we use now as well. And perhaps we can talk about that. But yeah, job sharing, ask us anything if you like, but at the end, but we find it really works well in this space.
So I'm just going to add to that because we've got quite a male audience in the room. Job sharing is not just for women. So please don't think that. And also, although we started doing it at a particular life stage where, you know, women are often thinking about how do I juggle continuing in a senior role with part-time work or wanting to work fewer hours, I think you can job share at any life stage. So it's a really good option as well if you're further along your career journey and you're thinking, actually, I'm interested in slightly reduced hours. And it's an incredible option because it enables people who want to continue, who have got to a senior role, to continue in that role, or women, you know, or anyone earlier in their career who can no longer sustain full-time working to continue in that way. and it does take work. You really, really have to work behind the scenes at your communication and understanding and at times generosity, and you need to be able to back each other up no matter what. And that does take a lot of work, but it is incredibly rewarding. And if you are a part-time worker, which many of you may be, you'll know that you're always carrying this tension that it's your day off, but you might still have to pick something up, or you might still have to do something, or someone might call you. Whereas if you're job sharing, the wonderful luxury is that I hand over to Harriet, and I know if I'm contacted out of hours, it's going to be Harriet, because she'll be facing off, but she may need to say to me, hang on a second, Myra, what did you agree on Tuesday about X, Y, and Z? And it's a Thursday, so it's Harriet. So we are very evangelical about it. And ultimately, if you're managers, it's a really important option to be offering your staff, because the flexibility and support that it can give them and the contribution that you'll get back from them will really outweigh any kind of risk that you take in managing them. So I'll go on a bit into leading in the public sector as well, and managing digital transformation in the public sector. And it's just a few high-level thoughts, which I hope will complement actually what you've just said, Angharad. And our focus is, our career is very much in the public sector. I've done some non-executive work in the university sector as well, at the University of Sussex. So I think I've got some familiarity with some of the challenges that I imagine you're facing, and I'm interested actually in your knowledge transformation. It's interesting to see how that's developed, because I remember the whole kind of debate about that, classic dilemma that the university sector's faced for such a amount of time. So I'd just like to say, in terms of digital transformation in the public sector, sort of 25, 30 years into that, it's a very incomplete journey, really, really incomplete journey. And I was really lucky. I was working internationally, but I was working on the early stages of iPlayer, which at that time came from being Radio Player, actually. And we had a lot of audio in the world service, so we contributed a lot to the sort of Radio Player stage. And it was incredibly exciting, and there was some kind of first mover advantage. The BBC really was at the turn of the century in that innovative leading place. And I think now the marketplace is so much harder. It's so much harder in the university sector, I imagine, and certainly within the public sector in general, in terms of users' expectation and funding, actually, in terms of digital transformation, the amount of funds that are available and the consolidation in the market as well, I think is making it very, very competitive for the public sector. And in some ways, COVID, I know that was absolutely transformative for the university sector, and some areas of the sector responded very effectively, and others obviously faced greater challenges. But COVID's just amplified that enormously. Obviously, it's given us the flexibility around remote working, and you're delivering a lot more content and engagements online. But in fact, it's just driven people's expectations through the roof in terms of our users, and also concurrently created significant need, I think, as well, in terms of the challenges of exclusion now, because the more that's online, the more that we've got the exclusion challenge, and expectations are just absolutely transformed. I think Harriet may want to come in a bit here, but in terms of digital transformation, so I think the challenge has never been greater. And also we're going into whatever people are saying in their manifestos, we're going into a really tight budget situation as well. So we're going to be asked to do more with less, and in new and creative ways. So the requirements for really effective transformation of our service delivery are going to be really significant. In my experience, the things that really drive digital transformation are burning platforms, but you don't want to be with your back against the wall and with a terrible burning platform, because although that drives transformation, it also drives kind of panic activity, and it's not the calmest, as we all know. It's not the best place to be when you're trying to change and transform. Really amazing leadership. The projects that I think we've worked on and the programs that we've worked on that have been most successful and powerful and quickest have had really senior leadership that's endorsed that. Most of them haven't had that. Most of them have had kind of half of your C-suite in and half out, or 1/3 in, 1/3 wavering, and 1/3 out. If you can line up your C-suite, that's the dream scenario. And I think anyone working in digital transformation, try again. And I think I recently did a blog piece about, is the language of digital transformation really as powerful and as effective now as it once was, as it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And it's interesting because I was in a group of Whitehall colleagues yesterday, and they're thinking already, as you can imagine, around spending reviews and the next government coming in. And there's a real question around what language do we now use to convince people to deploy digital and data faster, more effectively. So there's a dilemma that I'm thinking about, which is you kind of got digital transformation in one corner, which is sort of old money, and AI, which is the new money. And actually, we need to do the bit in the middle because we're all running down the road and going, whoa, you know, yeah, that's really exciting. And I think that's language around sustainability, accessibility, inclusivity, and we've kind of got to develop a new language around that to make the case, I suspect, to our stakeholders and other leaders. So we're talking much more around services, and I'm saying this also because the biggest blockers to digital transformation are often the people, the C-suite, who are responsible for their services, but are thinking in their kind of services siloed ways. And over here, you've got your director of transformation, probably. You've probably got your head of IT or something like that. And you may have someone who's seconded into a change management, change role. And actually, where we've really got to work is at the C-suite level, the kind of, I can't remember exactly the university structures, but, you know, in local gov, it would be your social services, your planning, housing, environment, that kind of structure, and convince those people that their services are going to be transformed and have to be. It's not a luxury, it's a sustainability of their services through digital and data, of which AI will be a part. I think digital and data are inextricably linked. I wouldn't have a conversation with a leader or in terms of delivery one without the other. And I think the key message around AI at the moment is there's no AI without data. So don't let anybody have in your senior leadership funding spaces have that conversation without saying data. In terms of technology, my advice would be, I don't quite know how to put this, I'll put this indiscreetly, which is those wonderful guys who are sitting in those little cupboards locked away with the door shut and they've got their back to you. Do not allow that to happen. And those great guys who've got all the post-it notes and then the trainers and looking really, you know, and the what are they called? Those nice pens. Can't remember, you know. Exactly, thank you. And the Sharpies. They all need to, then we need to meld those together. So I think it's really important to work with the traditional technologists who are working probably on your legacy tech and keeping everything running and sustaining it. We kind of have to make that marriage work because unless you have the two working hand in glove, great opportunities are being missed. We need both of those types of expertise, both of those types of skills. That kind of, is it agile? Is it waterfall? I think that's a little bit old hat now. It's the kind of, how can you meld those together to do the right thing at the right time in the right place? And so I wouldn't get too distracted by is it agile, is it waterfall? I think it's really good to be pragmatic and just take the best of both worlds. And I think there are amazing people with incredible skills who work in that legacy tech area, who are completely competent and adept at earning and adopting agile skills. And similarly, the post-it notes brigade, who are great fun but also tend to need in my kind of managerial experience a wraparound of some structure and governance. And you talked about governance, and that's really important. So my perfect conditions for digital transformation, which will never exist, but I would love if they did. And if anyone's got a job going that has them on tap, me and Harriet, well, we'll be interested in talking to you. But right now we're trying to create them in Wales. So ideally, some kind of long vision of where you want to get to, some kind of North Star, which will probably be 10 years out or so. And that's really, really difficult because you can't predict what's going to happen in terms of technology and development, but you can kind of talk about users' experience. You can kind of talk about frictionless government. You can kind of talk about the blockers that you no longer want to be there, and then imagine that upside. I think if you can bring your senior leadership team with you, your executives, that's really important. multidisciplinary teams with people of different ilks and different perspectives, and well, like that, there's kind of, don't allow anyone to be old school and new school. We've all got to be in this together. User-centered design, definitely use your users, because otherwise what will happen is the policy intent will never be operationalized unless we meet user needs, because the policy intent will be translated into some failed demand or some other unintended consequence. And there's so many unintended consequences of government policy where the implementation is such that people do things, you know, that weren't expected. Low-hanging fruit are really important, and it's really difficult to do this, which is the show the thing. I think the GDS mantra and the Mike Bracken mantra around the show the thing is incredibly powerful. And if you can prototype in a thing and demonstrate in a thing, it's satisfying for the teams that you work with, and it sways your executives. If you can hold up, you know, a phone with a lovely little prototype on it and say to your director of social services, this is what your people in the field are going to see, and it's going to take them 5 minutes to fill it out. And why don't you fill it out actually and see what it's like updating a case management file? That really, really helps. But that it's difficult to do that all the same. I think finding the tipping point is a lovely, lovely moment. And if you can, so the show the thing ultimately leads to your tipping point. And that's because Harriet and I can go and talk to as many directors of social services or vice chancellors or whatever and say, if you do this and if you do that, and we'll show you a whizzy PowerPoint presentation and all the rest of it. And they'll go, yeah, that's great. And then we'll leave at 11 o'clock and they'll have their coffee and go into their normal day job. And they'll probably go home and say, well, I had a really interesting meeting with so-and-so. But if they then go to a conference and meet the vice chancellor from, I don't know, Hull or something, and he says, oh, I've just done this amazing digital transformation piece and we did X, Y, and Z. That's what will change. People like you talking to people like you is what changes your mind usually. So it's really important to kind of show the thing to the people who are going to evangelize for you and tip the others like them over the line. Comms. You can never over communicate too much. And in fact, Harriet and I have been reflecting on comms and are we communicating enough at the moment? And communicate. I went and met a stakeholder yesterday in the Vale of Glamorgan and was chatting to them, and you know, was going to talk about all the things that we're doing, and she didn't even know who we were. And I thought, that's because you forget. You think people know about you, and they just don't. You know, and probably you're facing a similar dilemma. People are probably thinking, oh yeah, Cardiff Business School, yeah, I'm sure they've got something good going on in this area, haven't they? But I don't quite know who it, you know, it's that kind of tell the story, tell it again, and never think people know about you, because they know less about you than they do. And similarly, the governance and stakeholder management in any kind of transformation is so important. We've always had a mantra, which is, you know, your stakeholders are the people who can kill you. And I think that's, I'm that cup half empty, Harriet's half full. You know, who can kill you? That's always really who they can stake. And then, yeah, I suppose finally, linking back to the job share is, I just think change is not a project as well. Change is continuous improvement. And that is a really important lesson from Agile. And that makes it very difficult to do the governance and the design and the business case. So there's also something about your exit strategy, not just your capital project business case, but how do you sustain continuous improvement? How do you stop wonderful things after the project has come to an end being broken up and lost and dissipated into underfunded BAU? And so there's something about planning the exit strategy and continuation and continuous improvement, because the market is always going to be moving. You know, it's really competitive now. And AI is interesting in this respect as well, going back to the technologist point. I think AI is absolutely fascinating in many, many ways. But one of the fascinating aspects about it is it's how the relationship between open source and proprietary software is really working. It's absolutely fascinating. And also, this is the first technology that's not being implemented and experimented with. I mean, it is in some ways, obviously, by the poor guys locked away in the legacy technology cupboard. It's actually, you know, someone writing a policy document. Yeah, they're on ChatGPT. Of course they are. They're all over it like a hot rash already, because it's going to summarize it. And, you know, Harriet refers to it as the sort of the enthusiastic intern who's going to give you the first draft. And that is definitely true. But it's going to be really interesting how this develops. And it's also fascinating how large organizations are taking the work in effect of the open source world, repackaging it and selling it back to us to then run on our proprietorial data. And I think that the commercial arrangements around AI are really interesting, especially if you guys are doing lots with Copilot already, which probably many people are experimenting with. So finally, sorry, because I did say finally a few minutes ago, in terms of personal resilience, it's just really hard. And I'm very grateful that I have been able to job share, because going through this enormous change that we're going through in our workplaces takes a lot of resilience as well. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Have I got it?
If you want to add anything to that.
I'll just say a quick thing, which is that what brought us to Wales, really, apart from being kind of on the border and you know, wanting to work closer to home and being, you know, that's enough London. But I started my career at Radio Wales, in fact, so I've had a strong connection. But it was the digital strategy for Wales, which is a fantastic story, and that is the story that brought us to Wales. And as I say, it's a true story. It is really the right ambition for Wales. And I think the thing that CDPS can do that others can't necessarily is because we have the Pan Wales remit, we can draw people together to tell the same kind of national story around the desire for digital modernisation. And my view is that we are, and what I say now is, it's not about transformation, because in fact, this is just the way the world is now. It's not going to change. It's not going to go back to analog. People aren't going to pick up the phone and or write nice letters again. It's just not going to happen. And that is, and the state sector has accepted that. But the critical question is, how well are we going to do it? If we're going to do it well, what are the implications for our citizens and our businesses? If we're going to do it badly, what are the implications for our citizens and businesses? And we surely want the good implications for our citizens and businesses. We don't have the bottom line to drivers like the private sector does. And as a result of that, I'm really concerned about digital exclusion, because it seems to me that the private sector has really abandoned the kind of, 15% inconvenient, probably not very valuable customers who cannot engage online. So, and the state is picking up that burden disproportionately. So there are things to worry about there. But I think it is critical. And we talk about, as a North Star, Wales needing to be a nation, a state that can use digital tools to fulfill its policy goals well. And at the moment, we're not necessarily doing that. And I think about, and I give an example of the council tax reduction policy, which was a fantastic policy, but the execution of that policy resulted in a process that, when tested, 90% of people could not complete the application. Even in a test situation, this wasn't them sitting at home stressed on a sofa trying to fill it in on a mobile phone. This was them sitting with one of our colleagues trying to fill it in on a computer. And one woman said, if I really needed this, I'd have chucked the computer out of the window by now, because I would be so frustrated. So the critical thing is that we can use digital tools to fulfill the intentions we have as a nation. And that is so important. All these new policies that we have, all of these new nation building intentions that we have, if you get someone in a local government team, a health team, or a policy team to explain what their goals are, you will sit there thinking, you need digital to do this. And you need to use digital tools well to meet your goals. And that's just how the world is. So can we do it well and not do it badly? And what does it take to do it well? Actually, it takes collaboration, join up, seeing this as a national story, understanding our roles as part of that national story and fulfilling them. And, easy for me to sit here and say, but I've got real hope at the moment, because I do feel like CDPS, with that Pan Wales remit, is enabling. And with the forums that we have now, people are coming to those forums to speak at a national level. Our communities of practice and are national. It does feel to me as though I've got the first glimmer of that as a national story that we can kind of gradually be feeling our way towards. Hugely difficult, all the challenges, yes, absolutely. But I think collaboration is Wales' superpower. So let's really use it.
Thank you. Thank you all. We're running tight for time. I don't think we have any questions online, but if there is somebody here in the suite who had a very quick question, great. Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah. Hugh Marshall, I'm from Business Wales. Question for Angharad, really. Looking at, obviously, with digital technology now, with sort of large language models, in Wales, obviously, a lot of our services are provided bilingually. If you look at somewhere like Gwynedd, where it's a necessity because the majority are iaith Cymraeg, iaith cynta, Welsh language first speakers. And in Cardiff, it's a case of parity of services. How do you think that's impacting on sort of development? Because we're looking at things like AI coming on, but obviously if they're basing themselves on large language models, the lack of Welsh language digital content is going to have an impact.
So, so this is a question that's not the first time this has been raised, and it's something that we do come back to repeatedly. On the one hand, there is just going to have to be a piece of work around it. You know, ultimately, work is going to have to be done to ingest large quantities of Welsh language into these models and help use it. There are other approaches around it. So a lot of the work that we're doing at the moment is around what we call semantic pointers. So I don't know the technical background of everyone here, but to put that in sort of layman's terms, everything that you might talk about in whatever language and in so an example where it might be used a lot is if you were maybe analysing what people are talking about on Twitter. And people tweet in all sorts of languages. But with these models, they can identify not just keywords, but how something sort of feels. So in the same way that you would recognize a cat as being a cat because it's got pointed ears and a tail and it's a certain size, and so, but you would also recognize a bush that looks like a cat as saying that looks like a cat, or a cushion that looks like a cat, or a handbag, or all of those things. And you would be able to pull those together in your mind. Semantic pointers do that kind of thing. So they get the sense of something by saying, okay, if we are the things that make something cat-like, pointy ears, whiskers, a long tail, and each one of those gets given a number, a unique number value. So then it doesn't matter whether you're recognizing the pointy ears and the whiskers and the tail on a cute little Hello Kitty handbag, or if you're recognizing it on a cat that's just walked across the floor in front of you. It's linking those unique things. And that does that, and it does it across languages. So that's part of how AI is evolving to deal with some of these issues. So in some ways, the technology is dealing with that broader question of multiple languages because we live on a planet with hundreds and thousands of languages. And we're not the only nation dealing with that. You know, imagine delivering public services in India, where you have a huge list of official languages and people who are speaking across them in their day-to-day lives normally. So it is something that we're aware of. We're looking at deploying technologies on how to address that. But there is a body of work around it. And we're at the moment, one of the things that we're looking at in the university, because it keeps coming up, is where can we look to fund the pull your sleeves up, elbow grease, getting the Welsh language into it so that we've got that resource so that it is equally available to people to use these models in Welsh as in English.
Thanks, Angharad. I would normally draw things to a close. We do have one question online, which is probably for Harriet and Myra. So I'm going to ask Catherine if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask your question. If we can be as brief as possible so that we can finish before too long, but I'd like to squeeze one more in. Can't unmute. Okay, Angharad will ask the question on Catherine's behalf. Best laid plans. Okay.
Yes, hi. In a world of reducing budget in public services, are product service teams a realistic ambition? Catherine does add, although she's proud to say they've set up their first product team around flood warning service.
Yeah. Well, the work, I mean, actually, Pete is our training and skills lead, and he's doing a piece of work called Minimum Viable Teams, because we don't feel that the kind of the full-blown multidisciplinary full DDAT team is relevant in all settings in Wales, but we want to explore what kind of team could be identified as a minimum viable team. And Pete's concept is that we have identified the digital standards, digital service standards for Wales. They are honed from global examples, but they are applicable to Wales, and they are officially Wales's digital service standards. And Pete's thinking is around match the team to the digital service standards. If you have a team that can, however many people there are, you feel confident they can work towards those digital service standards, then that is probably an adequate minimum viable team. If you haven't got a team that can even have that ambition to work towards those digital service standards, you probably need to look at it and think about what additions you need. I'm very optimistic about team building and the kind of concepts. We're using these concepts with organisations like the Welsh Revenue Authority, with Keed, who are the new Centre for Excellence for Procurement. We're going to be working with SRS, which is the South Wales local authority and Gwent Police technology provider, to start to work out what kind of minimum viable team they need. So it's a really important piece of work. And no, I don't think that we can just kind of say, yeah, we've all got to have a GDS style DDAT product team. It's not applicable in, we need to examine our settings and our needs and our goals and work that out with the support of the kind of thinking that we're doing in CDPS around minimum viable teams.
Lovely, thank you. On that note, I'm going to draw things to a close this morning. I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Angharad, to Harriet, and to Myra for joining us this morning. Really appreciate your time, especially the two of you who've travelled through trains and cancelled trains and so forth.
Great.
Loads of information shared this morning, load of advice and guidance, which is welcomed by us all. I even recognise myself in there at one point being the person with the Sharpie in the post-it notes. I'm a man of my times. Can I just say, I'll share all of the information with you. So some of the slides, it'll have details, contact details and so forth. So if you do want further information, I'm sure the guys won't mind you keeping in touch.
If people in the room have got questions, well, I'm happy to stay and chat.
Lovely,
as well.
thank you. And can I just say thank you to everybody who's joined us here in the suite or who's joined us online. Diolch yn fawr iawn am eich cwmni chi eto bore yma. Hope we see you next month. Details of next month's briefing will come out before too long, as soon as I can cross the T's and dot the I's. But until then, I hope you have a great day and we'll see you soon.